"You're fired." Words I never thought I'd hear from my father. But there he was, sitting behind his massive mahogany desk, staring at me with icy gray eyes that held none of the warmth I once knew. His office felt tight and airless, even with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a stunning view of the Boston skyline. "Dad, just let me explain the Walker account," I began. He raised a hand sharply. "It's Mr. Smith in this office, Patricia. And there's nothing to explain. That account was the last straw. Your so-called creative strategy lost us a $71 million deal." I gripped the arms of my chair, forcing myself to stay calm. But the traditional method wasn't working. We just needed one more month to see results. "Enough," he barked, slamming his palm against the desk. His polished CEO wore rattled, as if in protest. "This isn't a playground for your experiments. This is Smith & Sons. We've thrived for 35 years because we stick to what works." I almost laughed at the name Smith & Sons. The irony never hit harder. I had worked here since I was 17, starting in the mailroom and climbing my way up through every department. Meanwhile, my younger brother Nathan walked in straight out of business school and got handed a VP title like it was a diploma bonus. "The board agrees with me," he added, sorting through papers without looking up. "You're not cut out for leadership at this level. Maybe a smaller company would suit you. A boutique firm, perhaps. Something more your speed." His tone was drenched in condescension. I aimed slowly, smoothing the front of my charcoal gray suit, the same one I'd worn while bringing in millions in new business. Apparently, none of that mattered now. "You're making a mistake," I said quietly. He didn't even glance up. "HR will handle your severance. Clear out your office by the end of the day." I turned to go, then paused at the door. "Dad." He looked up, clearly annoyed. Remember this moment. The walk back to my office felt like a slow funeral procession. My eyes dropped, and whispers followed me. News traveled fast. Only Ashley, my assistant for the past 6 years, met my gaze with honest sympathy. "I heard," she said softly, following me inside. "It's not fair. Everyone knows Nathan lost the Walker deal. He promised deadlines no one could meet." "It doesn't matter," I said as I began packing my things into a cardboard box. "Nathan's a Smith son. I'm just the daughter who doesn't fit the mold." Ashley watched as I carefully removed my framed Harvard MBA and stacked up my awards. "What will you do now?" she asked. I paused as I gently wrapped a photo of my mother. She passed away when I was 12, but I could still hear her final words. "Don't let them dim your light, sweetheart. Shine anyway." "I'm going to build something," I said, surprising even myself with how certain I felt. "Something bigger than Smith & Sons could ever dream of." Ashley's eyes lit up. "Need an executive assistant?" I smiled and looked at her for the first time in years. Ashley wasn't just an assistant. She was a skilled operations leader, held back by an outdated corporate mindset. "Not an assistant," I said. "A partner." And just like that, the end of one chapter became the beginning of something entirely new. At my company, how about Chief Operating Officer instead? Ashley's eyes widened in shock. "You're serious?" "Dead serious," I said, handing her a business card, the one without the Smith & Sons logo. "Just my name and number. Call me tomorrow if you're interested. And Ashley, don't mention this to anyone." The elevator ride down to the lobby felt unreal. 16 years of my life, gone, reduced to a single cardboard box. I had sacrificed birthdays, holidays, relationships, weekends blurred into workdays. I brought in clients that doubled the company's revenue. But in the end, none of that mattered, because I wasn't a son. As I pushed through the revolving doors onto Fifth Avenue, my phone buzzed. A text from Nathan. "Tough break, sis. But don't worry, I'll take good care of your clients. Maybe retail's more your speed." I didn't respond. Instead, I raised my hand for a cab and gave the driver an address in Brooklyn. It was time to visit the one person who had never stopped believing in me. 15 minutes later, I stood in front of a familiar red door. A moment later, it opened to reveal my grandmother. Elegant as ever, her silver hair perfectly styled, even at this hour. "Patricia," she said softly, her eyes narrowing as she saw the box in my hands. He didn't.
He did.
She stepped aside and guided me straight to the kitchen. A pot of tea was already steaming, like she'd somehow known I was coming. Tell me everything, she said, setting out her good teacups. And so I did. I told her everything about the Walker account, Nathan's unrealistic promises, my father's cold dismissal, and the board's final decision. She listened closely, her sharp blue eyes, so different from my father's cold gray, absorbing every word. When I finished, she stood up and disappeared into her study. I heard drawers opening and papers shuffling. A few minutes later, she returned with a thick manila envelope. I've been waiting for this day, she said, sliding it across the table. Your mother knew it would come too. She made me promise to give this to you when it did. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was another envelope, sealed with wax, and a folder stuffed with legal documents. My eyes widened as I read through them. Grandma, this is your mother's inheritance, she finished for me. The one your father doesn't know about. Her family's shipping business, real estate investments, and trust funds. Everything she built before she married him. All of it now yours. I stared at the numbers. It wasn't quite Smith and Son's money, but it was millions. More than enough to start something new. Why didn't you ever tell me? Grandma Amy sipped her tea calmly. Because your mother believed you needed to try it his way first. To give him a real chance to see your worth. But he failed. Spectacularly, wouldn't you say? I looked back at the documents. Possibilities rushed into my mind like water breaking through a dam. The Walker account, they had wanted exactly what I'd proposed. They sought innovation, modernization, and a fresh perspective. Then maybe I began. Grandma Amy gave a knowing smile. Maybe it's time to show them what Patricia Smith is truly capable of. We stayed up late into the night planning. And by the time I left, one thing was certain. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning. I had the beginning of a plan, one that would turn everything upside down. My father said I wasn't cut out for business. Fine. I'd show him exactly what kind of business I was made for. The rules were changing, and Smith and Sons wouldn't see the storm coming until it hit them. 1 year later, the headquarters of the Walker Group buzzed with energy. Inside their sleek downtown conference room, Ashley, now my chief operating officer, was getting everything ready for our big presentation. Through the glass walls, I could see Terry Walker pacing near the reception, checking his watch every few minutes. They're here, Ashley whispered, glancing at her tablet. Smith and Sons just arrived in the lobby. I smoothed down the sleeve of my crimson-red Armani suit, bold, confident, and nothing like the dull grays and blacks my father used to prefer. Perfect timing, I said. Right on time to watch their biggest account slip away. Ashley grinned. You planned this, didn't you? I gave a small smile. The presentation timing? Pure coincidence. The fact that they're desperate to keep Walker's business while I'm here to take it? That's just good strategy. The past year had been a whirlwind. With my mother's hidden inheritance and Grandma Amy's connections, I built Aerotech Enterprises from scratch. We focused on exactly what Smith and Sons feared most, fresh, modern business solutions for a digital world. And Ashley? She had been my secret weapon. She helped bring in top talent, smart, overlooked professionals stuck behind closed doors at my father's firm. I wasn't the only one tired of the old ways. The conference room door swung open. Terry Walker entered, followed by several board members. And right behind them, looking far more tired than I remembered, came my father and Nathan. My dad stopped short when he saw me. His face went pale. Nathan took a step back, nearly bumping into someone behind him. Patricia, my father said, his voice cracking. I met his gaze calmly. Mr. Smith, I replied, extending my hand. What a surprise. I wasn't told Smith and Sons would be joining us today. Terry looked between us, clearly confused. You two know each other? She used to work for us, my father said stiffly, ignoring my hand. Smith, Terry said, raising an eyebrow. Any relation? Just a former employee. My father cut in quickly. I smiled, my tone light but firm. Actually, I'm his daughter. But that's old news. Shall we begin? What followed was an hour-long masterclass in everything my father had once called reckless. I walked them through Aerotech's transformation strategy, AI-driven analytics, smart cloud platforms, real-time data solutions, everything the Walker Group had asked for a year ago. Everything they didn't get from Smith and Sons because tradition got in the way of progress. Nathan's face turned red as Walker's board members nodded and whispered to each other, clearly impressed. My father sat silent, jaw tight, hands clenched beneath the table. When I finished, Terry leaned back in his chair, visibly impressed. Very impressive, Miss Smith. This is exactly the kind of vision we've been looking for. But may I ask, why didn't you offer these ideas back when you were at Smith & Sons? The room went quiet. All eyes shifted toward my father. I did, I said softly. In fact, this exact strategy was the last presentation I ever gave there. I turned to my father. Wasn't it, Mr. Smith? He didn't respond. His silence said everything. Terry stood. Well, I think we've seen all we need. Ms. Smith, your proposal is exactly the direction we're ready to take. I believe our legal team already has the contracts prepared. Nathan's face went white. Wait, what? You can't be serious. We've handled your business for 21 years, my father said, desperation edging his voice. Terry Walker didn't flinch. He sat with quiet confidence, hands folded on the polished conference table. Yes, he replied calmly. And in those 21 years, Smith & Sons has fallen behind. You ignored every major technological shift in the industry. We need more than tradition now. It's time for a change. The silence that followed was thick, final. Then pens touched paper. Contracts were signed. As Terry shook my hand, I glanced across the room. My father stood near the window, but he didn't seem to be seeing anything. He looked older, worn down, not just by time, but by pride, mistakes, and the weight of a legacy slipping through his fingers. For a fleeting moment, I felt something almost like sympathy. But then the memory returned. That day in his office. His voice was cold and dismissive, telling me I didn't belong. That moment had lit the fire. And this moment was the result. The Walker deal was just the beginning. Over the next 8 months, Aerotech Enterprises moved quietly, but with sharp precision. We didn't steal clients from Smith & Sons. We gave them what they had been asking for all along. Modern solutions, faster results, and partnerships built on listening, not lectures. Client after client, name after name, they made the switch. Not out of loyalty to me, but because we delivered what they needed, while Smith & Sons clung to their past. Then came the day I'd unknowingly been waiting for. Ashley rushed into my office, breathless with excitement. Alex, she said, you need to see this. She handed me her tablet. On the screen was a financial headline in bold. Smith & Sons stock crashes amid client exodus. Bankruptcy fears mount. Beneath the headline was a photo of my father leaving his office. His shoulders were hunched, his face pale and tired. The caption read, CEO Jonathan Smith declines to comment on company's future. Just then my phone rang. Grandma Amy. I just saw the news, she said gently. How are you feeling? I stood by the window, looking out at the Boston skyline. From this height, I could see their building. The same one where I had once been dismissed without a second thought. It didn't feel like a fortress anymore. It looked hollow. I didn't do this for revenge, I said quietly. I know, darling, she replied. You did it because someone had to. Because sometimes the only way to fix something broken is to build something better. They're going to lose everything, aren't they? I asked. There was a pause, and then her voice softened even more. Unless someone steps in. Someone who understands both the old and the new. Tradition and innovation. I didn't have time to respond. Ashley appeared again in the doorway, her face serious this time. Alex, your father is here. He's asking to see you. I inhaled slowly, steadying myself. Send him in. Grandma Amy's voice came through the phone one last time before I hung up. Remember what your mother always said. I do, I whispered. Don't let them dim your light. No, sweetheart. The other thing she said, sometimes the strongest bridges are built over the deepest divides. A moment later, my father walked into the office. He looked nothing like the man who had fired me a year ago. His suit was wrinkled. His tie sat crooked. He looked tired, not just in body but in spirit, as if a lifetime of certainty had collapsed beneath him. "Patricia," he said softly, "we need to talk." I motioned to the chair across from my desk, the very spot I had sat in when he told me I wasn't good enough. Funny how life works. "Yes," I said, my voice calm. "I believe we do." He sat down slowly, hands trembling slightly as he adjusted in the seat. For a few moments, he just looked at me. And for the first time, he didn't seem like a CEO. He seemed like a man who knew he'd lost something he couldn't get back. "The board is meeting tomorrow," he began. His voice was rough, strained. "They're voting on whether to file for bankruptcy or seek a last-minute merger." He paused, swallowing hard. "Nathan, he's already resigned. Took a position at Everhart and Company this morning." Of course he had. Nathan always knew how to escape when the walls started closing in. "And you're here because?" I asked, keeping my tone even and professional. "Because you won," he said, finally meeting my eyes. "You built what I said you never could. Something real. Something brilliant." While I watched 35 years of work fall apart, he looked down at his hands, weathered and unsure. "I was wrong about you." The room was quiet, not triumphant, not angry, just honest. And for the first time in a long time, the future didn't look like war. It looked like a choice. I was too proud, too stubborn to change. He sat there, shoulders slumped, the mighty Jonathan Smith, now a man grappling with the cost of his choices. I leaned back in my chair, studying him quietly. "Did you ever wonder why I stayed at Smith & Sons for 16 years? I asked. "Why I worked my way up from the mailroom when you could have given me an executive title, just like you did with Nathan?" He shook his head, unable to answer. "I stayed," I continued, "because I loved that company. Not because of the name. Not for the legacy. I loved what it could become. Every innovation I suggested, every risk I wanted to take, none of it was to tear down tradition. It was to help Smith & Sons grow, to keep up with the world around us." He nodded slowly. "And I shut you down. Every time." "Yes," I said quietly. "You did." I stood and walked to the window, looking out over the city skyline. The same view he used to admire from his corner office. But my voice wasn't bitter, it was honest. "You know what really hurt, Dad? It wasn't the day you fired me. It wasn't even when you gave Nathan every chance and left me fighting for scraps. It was that you never once asked me why I believed change was necessary." There was a long pause. "Tell me now," he said. I turned to face him. "Because business isn't about preserving yesterday. It's about preparing for tomorrow." That's something Mom understood. It's why her family's shipping company survived economic crashes and competition that wiped out everyone else. His head snapped up. "Your mother's company?" "But I thought it was sold after she died." I walked back to the desk and pulled out the documents Grandma Amy had given me that night, the ones hidden away for a future my mother had seen coming. I slid them across the table. "No, Dad." "It wasn't sold. She left it in a trust for me. She knew I'd need it one day. Maybe to save Smith & Sons. Or maybe to build something better." He stared at the papers, his face slowly transforming as realization set in. "She knew," he whispered. "She saw all of this before I ever did." "She did," I said softly. "She saw what you couldn't. What I wouldn't," he corrected himself with a sigh, finally accepting the truth. "So, this is it then? You're going to watch the company fall, knowing you were right all along." I reached for the intercom. "Ashley, bring in the proposal, please." Ashley entered with a thick folder and placed it on the desk with a small smile, then quietly left us alone. He looked at it confused. "What's this?" I sat down again, voice calm and steady. "A merger proposal. Aerotech Enterprises wants to acquire Smith & Sons." His eyes widened. "You'd buy us out?" "No," I replied, opening the folder. "Not a takeover. A true merger. Aerotech's innovation and digital expertise, combined with Smith and Son's decades of relationships and industry knowledge. We don't erase the past, we evolve it. He looked stunned. I'm offering to save the company, I said, sliding the proposal toward him. Even after everything. Even after you told me I wasn't fit for this world. But what you never understood is that real business, the kind that lasts, isn't built on control or tradition. It's built on vision, integrity, and trust. His hands trembled as he picked up the folder. And the name, he asked quietly. Smith Aerotech. I answered with a smile. Honoring where we came from and where we're going. And your role? I'd serve as CEO, I said. I'll lead strategic growth and direction. You'd stay on as chairman emeritus, focusing on client relationships, what you've always done best. We lead together as equals. Not father and employee. Father and daughter. Partners. He didn't speak for a long time. Just read. Thought. Reflected. Then finally he looked up. And in his eyes, I saw something I'd never seen from him before. Not command. Not judgment. Respect. Your mother would be so proud of you, he said softly. She'd be proud of us both, I replied. If we make this work. He stood slowly, adjusting his wrinkled tie, a flicker of the man he used to be returning to his frame. The board meets at 10 tomorrow morning, he said. Join me? I nodded. I'll be there. After he left, I stood at the window once more, the skyline glowing in the fading afternoon light. For the first time, it didn't feel like a view of power. It felt like a possibility. That evening, I called Grandma Amy. Well, she asked, her voice warm with curiosity. How did it go? We're merging the companies, I said, barely able to believe it myself. Smith Aerotech. A blend of the old and the new. The best of both worlds finally coming together. She chuckled softly. Your mother always said, the strongest bridges are built over the deepest divides. Looks like you've built quite a bridge, Patricia. Her words settled into my chest, heavy with truth. This wasn't just a business decision. It was healing. It was a legacy. And it was finally mine. The next morning, I stood next to my father in the boardroom of Smith & Sons. The same room where, for years, I'd pitched ideas that were met with silence, skepticism, or polite rejection. But today was different. Today, we stood together. Equal partners. We presented the Smith Aerotech merger plan side by side. The room was quiet. So quiet you could hear the shifting of leather chairs and the soft hum of the projector. When we finished, there were no objections. No debates. Just a unanimous vote. Every hand went up in agreement. It was done. That afternoon, I sat in the office that had once belonged to my father. Now it was mine. The sunlight poured through the windows, bouncing off the shelves. The Best CEO award still sat there, my father's old pride and joy. But next to it now was something new, a framed photo of my mother, smiling softly at the camera as if she had always known this day would come. Ashley knocked and stepped inside with a clipboard and a satisfied grin. The press release is ready. Want to take a look? I smiled. In a minute. First, can you call the Walker Group? I want to tell them personally about the merger. She smirked. Already did. Terry Walker said, and I quote, "It's about time those Smith women took charge." I laughed. A genuine, free laugh. Then I turned to the window. The city stretched out before me, bold and endless. Somewhere out there, in an office not so different from this one, I imagined my father was doing the same, looking out over New York not as it used to be, but as it could become. A year ago, he had fired me for not understanding business. Now we were building a future together, something neither of us could have built alone. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't revenge at all. Sometimes, it's showing them a better way forward. And sometimes, just sometimes, the so-called black sheep becomes the family's greatest legacy. That evening, I made one more stop. I walked through the quiet cemetery and knelt beside my mother's grave, placing a single white Amy at her headstone. The merger was already making headlines. Smith Aerotech, a new era in business. You were right about everything, Mom, I whispered. Thank you for believing in me before anyone else did. As I stood, my phone buzzed with a message from my father. Dinner tomorrow? I'd love to hear more about your digital transformation ideas. I smiled, my heart full, and typed back, looking forward to it. The sun dipped behind the skyline, casting long shadows across the cemetery. But I wasn't standing in anyone's shadow anymore. I was casting my light, bright enough for all of us to see by. And maybe that, more than the deal, more than the title, was the greatest success of all.